we often have people come to us that say, I broke even, or I only had a loss. Do I need to report? Or I haven't reported because I only had a loss. In fact, that's more reason than ever to report, because the IRS doesn't know that you have a loss, and they may get transactions because either they're being shared with the government, or even as part of bankruptcy. A lot of these exchanges that are filing for bankruptcy, the information is now getting public, and it would be foolish to think that it won't be in the IRS's hands. And so the IRS is getting all this information and likely to initiate audits. And so one way that we've seen to avoid potentially these audits is to make sure that you report as accurately as possible and to report all of your transactions, especially if it's a loss, because if it's a loss, then you get a tax benefit, but also you're in compliance and hopefully avoiding an audit. Even if you have a loss now and you think, no reason to report, that loss can be taken in the current year against other gains. It can be taken in the current year up to $3,000 against income, or it can be carried forward to future years. And so we're all hopeful and expecting that the bull market will return and Bitcoin will reach $100,000 plus, and all the other tokens will follow. And when that happens, we're all going to have massive gains. And so it will be good to have losses to offset those gains. And these losses that we can take now or in prior years can help offset those gains for future years. So for a variety of reasons, including it's even just for your best interest and minimizing taxes, it makes sense to report even if you have losses. The tax code doesn't provide for exactly the type of situation that we're seeing with Celcius and FTX and a lot of these platforms. Right now, they're going through bankruptcy. And the tax code says that generally you can take a deduction or claim a loss once that loss is complete and known. So that's the main two prongs. And here with these bankruptcy, unfortunately, neither of these prongs, in our view, are satisfied. First, with respect to certainty, there is no certainty that the loss will occur. It's still going through bankruptcy. In the early days, Celcius was claiming that they had a plan to get out of bankruptcy and everyone's funds will be returned. I think SBF is still saying on Twitter that there are ways that everyone could have gotten all their funds back. And years ago, we saw with Mt. Gox, many of the holders were returned their funds. So while we're still going through bankruptcy, the certainty aspect doesn't seem to be met. Secondly, the complete loss. As part of bankruptcy, there may be a partial recovery. And so as a result, we're suggesting that our clients wait and see, not take a loss now, but see how the bankruptcy plays out. Also, during this time, we may get further guidance from the IRS. It has happened before. Back during the Madoff Ponzi scheme, the IRS issued guidance specifically and said that you could take a Ponzi theft deduction and clarified the rules in that regard. If you were on Celcius, FTX, BlockFi, and the list goes on, it may make sense to file an extension. Certainly consult a tax professional and talk through the pros and cons of it. But as we wait for clarity from the bankruptcy court and cross our fingers and hope for guidance from the IRS, by filing now or too early, you may be taking a position that later you might want to undo. If we can avoid that by filing an extension, that in many situations makes sense. One other piece of information is that an extension is an extension to file, not an extension to pay. And this is where people often get into trouble because the payment due date still remains in April. Even though you're extending your filing due date, your payment is still due in April. And so if you file an extension, you should make an estimated payment based on what you think will be due so that you avoid penalties and interest. Once you finally file, the difference between what you estimated and what you owe, you'll pay that or get a refund for any difference. But this way you can avoid or minimize penalties and interest.